Hi everyone and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is November 14th, 2017. The Prime Minister seemed to be on the ropes just a tiny bit before the election last month, and now he's come back swinging. Michael, you've been watching this too. We have the upper house and the lower house. They have different opposition parties now. What fun and games can we look forward to?
Yeah, that's the first time in history that that's ever been the case, where the opposition was different in both of the houses. We've got such a plethora of parties now, all kinds of split parties that are supposedly the opposition, that this might have been an eventuality, but again, it's historical. But the real shocker that has come out after the election, which was discussed never, not even way in the past.
Not even on this program.
Not even on this program, was the sudden idea put out, seemingly from Abe himself, that the current split of the amount of time inside the budget committee that is dispensed to the ruling party and to the opposition parties for question time needs to be revised. And the opposition parties say, what?
Right.
What do you mean? And why didn't this come out during the election? What possible reason might
Somebody's feeling their oats.
Someone is feeling their oats. Okay.
Yes.
If you have no idea of the history and no idea of how the Japanese government goes about policy manufacturing, the current split looks kind of weird. The ruling coalition controls 2/3 of the seats in both houses of the Diet, and yet it only receives 2/10 of the time to speak about budget issues. The remaining 8/10 goes entirely to opposition. And you say, wow, that's really disproportionate. And maybe there needs to be a shift. But there are some good historical and good functional reasons why that is so. In case of history, it's quite simple. This was an LDP request when the LDP was in opposition back during the DPJ era, that because we have to look over what you're doing, you need to give us more time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And indeed, if there is a shift between the 2 to 8 ratio that currently exists, let's face it, Diet question time will be a lot less entertaining.
Right.
And definitely a lot less informative, because those first 2/10 of the time, it's just basically people, it's rah-rah. It's rah-rah. It's exactly it. We, the government, are doing such a great job, and it's so great to hear all these wonderful thoughts from you, Mr. Prime Minister, and you, Mr. Minister of whatever.
Right.
Who needs that? Okay, but the people who want to get on television certainly do.
Right.
But in terms of the public and in terms of the public good, basically nothing is served. It's when the opposition gets to talk and say, look, what is this? What is that? That we learn something.
This is just in the finance meetings, or
this
throughout the whole?
Well, in the case, what really matters is the budget committee meetings, because those are televised.
Right.
Sure, you can look at the other committee meetings and how they're run they're live streamed on the web, and also they're archived there, so you can go back and look.
Same ratio?
Basically the same ratio, because the idea is that the purpose of having an opposition at all is to
raise those issues.
Is to raise these issues, to check that to be, if not a check on power, at least expose what it is that the government is doing. And that's been one of the arguments, in fact, in favor of not really messing with the electoral system too much, because as long as in the Diet questioning, the opposition gets to speak and gets to really hold the government to account, and government accountability is what's important,
right,
not winning, accountability, then it's fine. Now, suddenly the accountability time is being shrunk, and the opposition is saying, wait a minute, wait. And then they have a further technical point that's really important, I think. In the policymaking process, at least in the classical one that existed in the LDP, LDP members get to talk about the policy over and over again. First in the Policy Research Council in its various divisions, which are divided according to the various ministries. They're basically mirror images, each of the of each ministry. They get to talk to bureaucrats about the policy. They get to talk amongst themselves about the policy. Then it's shoved into the General Council after it clears the Policy Research Council. It goes to the General Council where anybody can come in and discuss this new idea. And then it gets given to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Only after that process. So LDP members have had their chance to talk about whatever it is inside the bill or long before.
Right. It's like almost any Japanese meeting you go to. Before you have the meeting, everything's already been discussed to death. It's just the formality of having the issues put on the table.
And the thing is, in this case, because it then gets submitted to the Diet members who are not in the LDP see the thing for the first time.
Get their first shot.
And they have not been a part of this discussion process. And so they say, okay, we deserve more time because you've already had a chance to speak about it. And that's the technical issue that eventually the opposition members, currently, if you watch the television programs, they're not getting that message out. But that's going to come their time as this issue is discussed more. Right now, yesterday, and actually this morning, NHK put out its report about a public opinion poll, and it clearly showed that the public is still not informed about the issues because the most popular answer is, well, maybe we should just have 50-50, 50% of the time for the government, 50% of the time for the opposition. That sounds fair, was the answer that got the most support. That shows that...
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. This sounds fair, and that there was not real thought put into what it is that happens in the Japanese policy process.
Well, it's a political issue, isn't it? If they have 2/3 of the vote and they put it up for the vote, we know exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly. So if it's not going to be on the vote in terms of voting, then the accountability has to come through the question time. And of course, there is that other matter, which is from before the election, which is the Kake Gakuen and the Moritomo Gakuen scandals, which the opposition wants to revisit.
And the Prime Minister is busy sweeping
under the rug.
Yes.
Yes, and that those two issues, those two school scandals, will appear in these 80%, this 2-to-8 ratio. That 8 part will reflect a lot of questions regarding this subject, which for Mr. Abe, he says, look, you had a chance in the Diet, and the public voted for my party. It must not be an issue. Let's move on.
Right.
And who knows what the eventual proportion is going to be. Obviously, since the LDP has put out a proposal, it can't go back to the 8-10, the 2-to-8 ratio, because it can't walk away with nothing.
Right. It'll be decided in this Diet session. This Diet session is expected to go until mid-December?
Yeah, but the thing is that it has to be decided first, because
otherwise we're not going to let the deliberations.
We're not going to have a procedure. So the thing is, it's not codified in law. It's not there's no. It does not say in the Constitution what one should do. It's merely a matter of custom, as was shown by the fact that when the LDP requested more time to hold the government of the DPJ-led government accountable, they were granted it as a custom. What it does look like is, one, yes, that the Prime Minister is trying to run away from the Kake Gakuen and Moritomo Gakuen scandals, but more importantly, that constitutionalism, and indeed the main opposition party in the House of Reps, is the constitutionalism party, right? They are very, very careful about procedures, and they're going to talk about procedures, and they're going to talk about the way things have been done as being part of the Constitution. And Mr. Abe has to be very careful because there are real landmines there for him. He's done a lot of end-arounds, the constitutional and customary procedures involving the collective security agreement or involving
Article 9 interpretation
and all
Article
these
9,
things.
Right.
He's done a lot of weaving and dodging and getting rid of the post-war regime, as he calls it. If he really wants to tamp down speculation that he wants to destroy Article 9 and the Constitution, then he might have to reconsider. They might have to go to a fallback position of a 3-7 split or something like that, because the opposition will not accept a 50-50 split.
But they're not in a position to insist, are they?
They are in a position to insist because they know that the Prime Minister's support is soft. Yes, his Prime
So
Minister...
they make a big brouhaha of it.
They make a big brouhaha of it, and it will make him look bad. And remember, again, this is from NHK's poll, which is the most recent. The reason, the main reason why people support the Prime Minister and his cabinet is that they can see no alternatives.
Right.
If he starts acting in a dictatorial way, alternatives will pop up.
Right.
And if anything, the experience of Koike Yuriko in this election cycle should show, when you start acting like a dictator, other people suddenly become quite much more attractive than they would be otherwise. And she really blew that. And if he doesn't see that as one of the narratives that came out of this election cycle, then he's in trouble.
Right. The poll that you've just referenced also mentioned that the highest negative attribute was untrustworthiness. We just don't trust him. We have no confidence in this Prime Minister.
That's right. And that's only going to get worse. And he has to be careful about the fact that, yes, he's standing very tall, but he still stands on sand. And it can wash away from underneath him just like it did in August.
Okay, so that's one issue to look out for. We've got other shenanigans that are going on. Bunshun is having a field day ever since the election.
Well, it must have been
predictable.
I don't know. I expected much more to come out during the electoral cycle in order to knock people down, but it seemed to have decided to wait and let them get reelected and then going after them.
Is that accurate? It seems that they're going after one party in particular.
Which party is that?
The Constitutional Party.
Why? And why is that?
Because apparently a lot of guys are in, what do you call it?
In flagrante delicto?
That's what I was going to say, yes.
Well, but
we're on TV, so I didn't want to say that. But
we're on YouTube, so it's okay.
Okay, well, maybe Mark can edit out the silly parts, but...
Yeah, well, there was... Yes.
It's unbelievable, though. I mean, it is part of life, it is part of politics, but, to come at this particularly pregnant point in time, it really hurts, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't necessarily hurt because there's not going to be an election, and everything can be forgotten by the time the next election cycle comes around. That there have been
branding, in terms of branding, we like these guys, we don't like these guys. These guys are up and coming. They're the new opposition party. We don't like them. Let's throw some mud their direction.
Well, certainly, if Bunshun held off during the election, then of course Bunshun has a side that it's on, which is against the LDP. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Yeah. A strong and successful Abe Shinzo is an incredibly boring story for the weeklies to try to talk about. While one where Abe Shinzo is always standing on the edge of the cliff, that's much more interesting. Well, then they might have held off for the very simple reason that it was not helpful to their overall narrative.
Right, right. What other issues are bubbling to the surface now that the seats have been divided and we're now facing a diet session?
Well, the most interesting one to me is this sudden concept that the Komeito is floating, that any kind of revision of the Constitution really needs to have about 2/3 public support.
No, they actually went a little bit further than that. They said the referendum is not quite enough. It needs to have a little bit more than that 2/3.
If I were in the Constitutional Party, I'd say, we're not with these guys.
Yes.
Whatever they're discussing has nothing to do with the Constitution. And I would find my way
Plus alpha.
I would find my way to get past them more toward the center.
Okay.
Because this is okay. They're showing that they're uncertain and concerned about where the Abe administration is going. But to float out this completely just man-made, utterly artificial standard that they are going to look for, that 2/3 of the public has to support it. No, sorry, Article 96 says you have to have 50% plus one voter.
Right.
That's it. That's all you have to do. No 2/3 and nothing.
But don't you think most nationals, most Japanese people, a lot of our viewers, in fact, also know that they can call a spade, and they go, you're grasping for straws.
You're trying to find a way to get out of what the election has created, which is a situation where you will be complicit in whatever happens in terms of the Constitution, or you have to break up the coalition.
Right.
You know, it's time to fish or cut bait, as they say in America. You're stuck with what
That's right.
the relationship that you created. No, we're going to invent this artificial standard. That, I think, is fascinating.
Right.
It shows how incredibly desperate they are. Of course, we're not in actual session so that no one is really concentrating. But nevertheless, floating this out, having the party leader float this idea, having Yamaguchi say it, that's amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. The president just left. He was on a 3-day visit here. We should do a session on that.
Yes, we should.
The Prime Minister's approval rating took a great uptick as a consequence of that. And maybe this is also giving him a little bit of throwaway.
Maybe a little, but also could be pushback in terms of the Komeito saying, hey, don't get too high on your horse just yet, which would be fine. But nevertheless, it's couched in a way that simply is not supportable by any known standard of anything that's happened before.
Before we wrap this up, we have to talk about defense and the statements of the president about Japan being able to shoot it down while it's traversing, Japan airspace, those kind of comments.
One has to wonder whether or not the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, has not been whispering to the Pentagon saying, if you guys ask for us to buy things, we can then put a purchase of an Aegis onshore anti-missile system as a part of our wish list. But otherwise, we can't do it. There's always that kind of communication going on between the two capitals, between the staffs, so that eventually when the two leaders meet, one says the convenient excuse that the other can use. And certainly the Abe administration has in the past, for example, with the Special Designated Secrets Act, it said, we need this act because the United States wants us to improve our control over secrets. To which the United States government said, what? I mean, yeah, fine, but, and then quietly behind the doors, we never asked you this.
Right.
Why are you doing this? And said, but they've done that before. That kind of behavior seems to be also happening now with anti-missile defense.
Right.
The only problem with that is that anti-missile defense, at least if we look at the Korean case, makes the Chinese very upset. They accept as a fait accompli that there are Aegis on ships, that the Aegis system is working on Japanese and Korean destroyers. Putting the THAAD in South Korea, that land-based system, and what would be a land-based system, Aegis ashore in Japan, changes the dynamic for them in terms of their second strike capability. And they really don't like it. The only way that Abe could ever get away with it is saying, well, the Americans told me that I had to get it.
Right. Well, I think that what the president said dovetails so nicely with what the prime minister is trying to achieve, which is having a strong samurai nation, a strong nation capable of defending itself, and having the tools and the utility to be able to do that without relying on the United States.
Well, also without relying on necessarily the people of Japan in terms of them approving a revision of Article 9. Instead, making the strengthening a technical issue rather than a constitutional one.
You're right. A lot of interesting issues that weave in and out as we have this discussion. Thank you for joining. Please stay tuned.